topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Alise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. If we've not met before and you don't know me, I'm a workforce advisor, organizational psychologist, management consultant, logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by building a dynamic, high-performance culture, inspirational leadership, and nurturing managers activated by meaning and purpose. Many organizations are not aware of how critical it is to invest in developing their leaders and managers, not just for their own effectiveness, but also to avoid burnout and keep them fulfilled. And did you know that inspired employees outperform their satisfied peers by a factor of 2.25 to 1? In other words, inspiration is good for the bottom line. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, alisecortez.com. Now, getting into today's program, we have with us today Dr. Arthur Ciaramicoli. He's a licensed clinical psychologist who has spent his entire career helping people reduce their prejudices toward themselves and others while increasing their understanding of the enormous benefits of diversity and the transformative power of empathic interpersonal relationships. He has published numerous books over the 35 years he's been treating clients. Today, we are talking about the book we co-wrote together, The Power of Soulful Healing, Turning Wounds into Wisdom. He joins today from outside Boston, Dr. Ciaramicoli. A hearty welcome back to Working on Purpose.
Good to see you, Alise. How are you?
I'm always better when I'm hanging out with you, somehow. I bet you get that a lot, don't you?
Sometimes.
Well, let's start by celebrating this thing that we put into the world together, the Power of Soulful Healing. And we got to share with our listeners and viewers just how it came to be. Let me start that process by sharing that listeners and viewers, Arthur has been on my podcast 4 previous times because he keeps writing interesting books. And somewhere along the line, he said to me one day, we should really write a book together. And I didn't think much about it. Then fast forward, I wrote one of my books called Coloring Life, which is about loss and grief and growing through it. And Arthur was good enough to write the foreword. And so I'll let you take it from here, Arthur, as to what happened next.
Well, I had read the book once, but one morning I got up and I took my time and was reading it slowly. And I was so impressed and moved. It's such a heartwarming book and really a book full of wisdom for people who have suffered loss. And all the insights that you've gained as you went through that process and losing parents in such close proximity. So I wrote you an email and said, hey, what about that idea? I was just rereading your book, and I really like the wisdom and insights that you imparted to all of us, the audience. And why don't we do this together? Because I think we could combine minds, combine experiences, and produce something that would be very meaningful for readers.
And I believe we have. And so what I like about what we've done together is you, of course, are a clinical psychologist. I'm an organizational psychologist. You've been working with really the intimate details of people's lives. And I've been doing it really from the vantage point of teams and organizations and work. And it really is, I think, a really beautiful commingling. And another reason, of course, that I said yes is, one, I wanted to be able to be more in your life with you. And I knew that both of us would transform in the process. And I certainly know that I have. So I wanted to start by letting our listeners and viewers know how it is that you and I are together talking about the book that both of us wrote together. It's just amazing. Okay, so the premise of our book, and this is so important, ladies and gentlemen, as you listen to us talk, Arthur and I have really come to a shared understanding, among many other things, is in that we approach the book and really what we're each doing together in our respective practices with the notion that every single one of us humans walking the planet is walking wounded. None of us get out of this life without being wounded. The question is, to what extent are we aware of our wounds, and what are we doing to try to heal them so we can have a bigger, healthier, happier life for ourselves and for those we relate to? Arthur, do you want to comment on that or give more of your perspective?
I would just add to that I think that so many people go through their whole lives and never resolve or heal their wounds. They don't pay attention to them. And in this fast-paced society, we just speed ahead without realizing that these old hurts are governing much of our behavior. So what we've tried to do in this book is slow the process down to really look at what has hurt you, become aware of it. How do you heal it? You heal it through empathic relationships, we both think. And also, in the process, you become soulful. And, the word soul has been interpreted by many different people, theologians and clinicians and so forth. But what we mean by it is finding that inherent part of you, that goodness part of you that you're born with, that's covered over by wounds, covered over by defenses, covered over by negative experiences. We want to uncover, and unlearn some of that irrational conditioning so that you can see who you truly are and become a soulful person.
Such a wonderful invitation, I think. And the way that this is partly done in our book is we share a fair amount about ourselves and our own journey as to what brought us to writing it together and really what we have dealt with in life. And then we both share a lot of stories about other people in relationship to us to illustrate and help you get thinking more deeply about how might you start working on your own wounds, or in our sharing, could our sharing help you surface your own wounds? And so do you want to share a little bit, Arthur, about your background as to what even got you into the field of clinical psychology, along with, of course, this idea of writing a book on soulful healing?
Well, I grew up in a family where my parents were always counseling somebody. I mean, we had people from all different countries stay with us at different times, and many relatives and older friends of mine. I would wake up in the middle of the night and still hear them talking to my father at the kitchen table. So I grew up in that environment. They didn't call it psychotherapy back then, but it was. So I grew up with that ethic of helping people, reaching out and helping people reach their potential, which is what I think both of my parents did very naturally. So that was the beginning. Why I focus so much on empathy. My brother, my only brother, my younger brother by 4 years, took his life at age 23, and I was the last one to talk to him. When he called me, I did what my dad would always do. My dad was a World War II hero. He would always give you a pep talk and say, you can, and you can kind of pull up your bootstraps and conquer this. And I made a grand mistake, because rather than listening to him sensitively and empathically, I did not. And as a result of that, he took his own life that evening. So from that point on, I tried to understand what would make a difference in a person's life who was at that desperate place. What would make a difference? I read everything I could, every religion, every psychoanalytic book, all the psychotherapies. And what I kept coming back to is the use of empathy. Why was empathy so important in an interaction like that? Because empathy changes brain chemistry. When you know how to listen empathically, you produce cortisol, you produce oxytocin in another person's brain, which makes them relax, makes them feel comfortable. It's been called a near miracle hormone. Contrary, when you're tense and you're kind of lecturing and speeding up the conversation, you produce cortisol, which is a stress-related hormone, which takes your empathic perception from out here to in here. It produces obsessive, narrow-minded thinking and repetitive, narrow-minded thinking, so you can't get out of your own spiral. I did not do that with him, but with hundreds of people since then in my long career, through empathic listening, I haven't had anyone who's taken their own life.
One of the things that I'm reminded of, and which I know I say in the book, is part of the reason that I kept having you come on the podcast was I really got present to how much I you have been so well read and taken upon yourself in your life, Arthur, to study other religions of the world, to revere them, to hold a place for them in your heart and as sacred knowledge. And I thought, this is what the world needs. It needs more understanding, more reach to better understand other people, to be curious about what matters to them, to try to get behind what it is that they really believe is sacred and critical in their own lives. And that's something I really feel is one of the many things I really respect about you, but it's also one of the other many reasons I wanted to co-author this book with you, is I believe that your interest in celebrating diversity, to champion diversity, is also so important in this whole process. So I want to just share that with you. I think you know that, but it's just so critical in terms of how I relate to you.
Well, and I related to you right from the beginning, because I told you were the first interviewer that actually read my books.
It's just amazing to me.
I would get these questions. Give us 10 questions to ask you and give us the answers. So like, what do we have in the interview for? It wasn't very much fun and not very interesting. So right away, I knew that this is something you take very seriously, and it touches your heart, and you want to learn, and you're a very curious person. So it meant a lot to me to be interviewed by you, and then again and again.
Oh, thank you, Arthur. I'll share this quickly, and then I also will situate my background and experience. So I was talking with my 22-year-old daughter about, of course, the podcast, and I was saying, oh gosh, in the last 7 years alone, I guess that means that I've read well more than 325 books, because some of the authors or some of the people that I come on don't necessarily have a book. And she immediately popped back. She said, well, you would have to pay me a lot of money to read all those books. I'm like, yeah, I know I'm weird like that, but my own journey to what brought me to want to contribute to this book is I hearkened back to my mid-20s when I was living in Spain and Brazil, especially in Brazil. I'd been there for a year when it really started to hit me how much I was living an incredibly beautiful and privileged life. I had, a live-in full-time maid, a full-time chauffeur, a full-time gardener. I wasn't working. I was jetting all over South America and Western Europe with my then boyfriend's job and such. It was an amazing life, except that it also was empty in the sense that I wasn't being of service to other people. I was just consuming a beautiful life. And that's where I started to understand this notion of what we call in logotherapy, the meaning vacuum, the existential vacuum. We as humans, turns out, we are really wired for service. We're at our best when we're helping and serving other people, especially in a way that aligns with our value system. And I wasn't doing that. So that's where my original thirst for meaning and purpose was ignited. And then, of course, over all these years, I was on my own spiritual quest to try to realize more of my potential. But that ache for meaning kept showing up for me over and over again as I was trying to reach for new and bigger, more expansive heights. And so my interest in co-authoring this with you was really also driven by my own reach for my own growth. And then also all the years of hearing other people get to a point when they felt so empty, something's missing. I don't quite know what it is, but I want something more. And I want to be a version of myself that I'm really, really proud of. And I'm not necessarily there yet. So that's what brought me to us co-authoring this as well.
I think it's interesting, too, because in the book we talk about Viktor Frankl, who's the founder of logotherapy, and
Right.
whose father, mother, I believe brother, and then his wife died in the camps. And he discovered meaning in the camps because, there's that one great story where in the middle of the night he sees a person who was literally dying of famine reach into his little pocket and had a piece of cheese and goes and gives it to a man down the hall there, who thought he was in a worse situation than he, and he comes back with a smile on his face. And he's trying to understand, why would he have a smile on his face when we're all dying, we're all starving? Well, because he was giving to another person. Mm-hmm. What does giving to another person do? It changes your neurochemistry. It makes you feel better. Yeah. And in the book, I compared Viktor Frankl to Adolf Hitler, who grew up losing his mother too early. He had a very stern, stoic, kind of punishing father, never worked out those wounds, and becomes a leader who wants to get back with everyone who's hurt him or offended him, and then picks the Jewish population as his enemy, projected hatred onto another group. And the two lives are so different. One is suffering in the camp. The other is the originator of the camp. Who has the more meaningful life? Viktor Frankl.
Mm. That is so, I love how you can stitch these different concepts together. And then up against that, let's do this, Arthur. Let's situate. Part of the reason that we wrote this book was we saw so much hurting in the world. And as you share, I'll ask you to start this process. Just share a bit of some of the things that we've been able to understand that helped us really propel the idea of writing the book together. And as we do so, listeners and viewers, listen for what you might relate to here. You might be also in pain or have wounds around some of these things that we're going to surface that are really commonly afflicting everyone around the world. Do you want to kick us off, Arthur, with some of these issues that are widespread?
Well, we have the highest rates of stress and depression that we've had in 30 years. We have an enormous suicide difficulty. We have an opiate crisis. And Americans, even American youth in the World Happiness Study, American youth came in 62nd. We used to be like 4th and 5th. The kids aren't as happy today. We live in a very fast-paced world, but we don't have leaders who teach us that you can be empathic, compassionate, and kind, and also intense and driven and accomplish things. We don't. Who do we have to look to who knows how to do that, who can teach us how to do that? Young men are following leaders who are cruel, whose language, and we have a chapter that talks about negative, toxic language, people who talk in very sadistic, cruel terms, and then they see them getting ahead. Corporate CEOs or someone who's making a lot of money, or a celebrity who talks like that, or a political leader. And then they're looking up to these people saying, oh, I guess that's the way. Mm-hmm. No, it's not the way, because these people aren't happy. They're miserable. You can tell by the way, and we in the book talk about follow a leader's language, follow the way they talk, how they talk about other people. Are they compassionate? Do they have a sense of soul? Is there soul in there, or can you not even see it? Those are not the people to follow. But we don't have enough people who are doing what we're doing at the moment, trying to spread the word of what brings fulfillment, meaning, and happiness. Being empathic, being giving. Soulful people are happy people because they're calm, they know how to listen, they know how to relate, and they always have people close to them. They're like a magnet. They attract people everywhere. You could drop them anywhere in the world and they would make friends.
Let's give that a quick break here, because there's a few other issues that I want to surface that I want our listeners and viewers to be thinking about. This would be a good time, though, to let them consider, as we take our first break, how they might be relating to what you just said. What kind of leaders are they actually following? Let's take our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We've been on the air with Dr. Arthur Ciaramicoli. He's a licensed clinical psychologist who has spent his entire career helping people reduce their prejudices toward themselves and others while increasing their understanding of the enormous benefits of diversity and the transformative power of empathic interpersonal relationships. We've been talking about where this book came from and really who it's for. After the break, we're going to surface a few more key issues that we're trying to address in the book, and then we're going to help and situate for you our offering of how you can start to become more soulful. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. As my focus on helping to create a world where we can all thrive, of course, I'm interested in the world of work. So I'm interested in helping to create organizations that are led by inspirational leaders that help their people find and contribute their greatness. And we do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So one of my latest came out called The Great Revitalization: How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And it's really a playbook to help leaders understand today's very diverse and discerning workforce, and what do they really want from you in terms of their culture and their employee experience. And then I offer you 22 best practices that you can start to equip to build your own culture to provide that for them. You can find my books on Amazon or my personal site, alisecortez.com. So picking up where we left off, Arthur, we were talking about some of the things that we were aware of that people were dealing with, grappling with, that also led us to write this book and to research this book. You talked a lot about, the depression and following very toxic leaders and how those become the role models. Can you share a few other things that I know you're deeply steeped in this kind of research about?
Well, my career, as you mentioned earlier, Alise, has been to help people eliminate the prejudices toward themselves, which I think we all grow up. Some people some people think they're not smart, they're not attractive, they're not creative, and on and on and on. And often is created by distorted views they get from other people that were inaccurate. So when you see the truth about yourself, you're more likely to see the truth about other people, and that's part of what we're writing about to a large extent in this book, is reducing prejudice towards yourself and others. How do you do that? The example I gave of this man, Luca, from one of my relationship groups, he came from a large Irish Catholic family, very, very religious, very, very Catholic, in Mass every day, sometimes 2 or 3 days a week, good man, corporate executive, and he's involved in sales now. He's trying to sell to a particular company, and he walks into the door of this company and he's introduced to the president, and he realizes that this person is Muslim. He can tell by the way he's dressed, and he starts to talk to him. And anyway, after a conversation, they both realize the product is not for him. And so as he's walking out of the building, the Muslim fella says to him, "Allah loves you." And he said, I froze in a moment. He said, "I thought of group and I thought of you and all our work on prejudice. And I turned around and I said, Allah loves you." And I walked toward him and I gave him a big hug, and he gave me a hug. And he said, "I drove home from Providence, Rhode Island to Boston, where he lives." And he said, "I actually was feeling depressed that day. But when I got in the car, I didn't feel depressed anymore." Why? Because I broke a barrier. I always thought of Muslims or people who dress like that and listen to they're terrorists, they're this, they're that. And instead, he says, Allah loves you. And I'm thinking, well, Allah's God. He's telling me God loves me. So what am I freezing for? I turned around, I hugged him. It changed something in me. What did it change? It changed his neurochemistry. He produced oxytocin, which makes you feel loved and generous and safe. So that little example he came in and gave to the group, and we're like, oh, that's what eliminating prejudice is about. Now you have a wider world. It's not just him and Irish Roman Catholics. It's anybody that can relate in a soulful way. That was a soulful interaction.
Definitely the medicine that I think the world needs. However, speaking of the word medicine, you and I both know that the opioid epidemic is off the charts and seemingly getting worse all the time, which is another area that we knew that we wanted to surface and situate, because you and I agree that rather than looking toward medicine to take care of whatever emptiness or depression you might have, what if we were to elevate that soulful connection?
We can produce neurochemicals by the way we relate. We don't have to go to a pharmacy, and I'm not anti-drugs because obviously they can save lives. But you and I, when we're conversing, we have changed our brain chemistry by the way we relate to each other, because you're a good listener. I try to be a good listener. And together we converge on ideas that make us feel understood. That changes brain chemistry. Most people don't know that this exists. On the other hand, if you say something that offends me and I start yelling at you or getting defensive, what am I doing? We're both producing cortisol. That chemical that I told you before produces obsessive, repetitive thinking. And then we cannot resolve anything.
Yeah, I'm already very aware of how much I feel connected to you. I know I can already feel elevated. I know that oxytocin is totally working. And I'm going to guess, listeners and viewers, that you can feel this too among us. It really is a beautiful thing. Before we get into really talking about our model of how people can start to become more soulful, Arthur, did you want to say anything else about anything, other plagues that we're dealing with that in terms of why we wrote this book and what we're trying to address?
Well, I think one of the dilemmas of our time is social media. Everybody knows this. What a lot of people don't know is there are paid trolls on social media. I write about that in one of the chapters that we discussed this. There are people, what is a troll on social media? They want to upset you. They want to criticize you. And with AI now, you never know what's real and what isn't real. There's stories of, excuse me, a couple of celebrities were writing online. They were writing to one of their persons that they had acted with, because online it said that she had cancer and was in a stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It finds out 2 days later it was all made up. She's fine. She called them up and said, you don't have to worry. We don't know what's true and what's not true. But what's happening is people idealize what they see on social media, because on Facebook and Instagram, people are posting all these beautiful pictures, and you never know what a person's life is. There's no empathy in this type of interaction because you can't see past the surface. And we have to be careful about that. When I was on Instagram this morning, I counted 13 ads about aging, about increasing energy, about toning the body, about losing weight. And I guarantee you that, because I know some of them, because I've read 11 of them were just scams.
Yeah.
But, they're costly and people buy into them. And we know now from people who spend a lot of time online, they have the higher rates of depression, higher rates of loneliness, because they're not connecting with other people. So it's dangerous, and you have to know what it's about. A lot of it is about selling things.
Uh-huh.
And great marketeers know how to sell things. You
Yeah.
put cream on your face right now, you're going to lose 8 years of wrinkles and so forth and so on. And it's $159.99. But you got to watch this video, which goes on and on and on. And all these MDs who aren't really MDs are telling you that, you got to look beyond the surface. That's what empathy tells us who to trust and who not to. Because we just don't accept what we hear on the surface or see on the surface.
Yeah. Instead of going to that which makes you ultimately feel worse about yourself, more anxious, more depressed, we're advocating, of course, for developing more of a soulful connection. And so to do that, let's do this, Arthur. Let's talk about the mnemonic acronym that we came up with, the reggae concept, which, as we both put forth, is really, it's about evoking a sense of rhythm and flow. And it's the expansion of each of these letters will actually guide people to a more soulful relating as a soulful human, and also lead more towards soulful healing. And I love this because at this stage, I think we've convinced people that, Houston, we have a problem. And so let's talk about some of those, about the reggae model. R is for resolving past hurts. You want to say a bit more about that?
Well, that's the first thing we talked about. And that's what plagues most people, because when you're in denial, you don't even know that it's behind you. So many people in therapy, we uncover something that happened 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Yeah. I had a nurse the other day whose mother passed when she was 18. She's 36 now. I said, how many times have you talked about this? Well, my family doesn't talk about it. My dad will not allow us to talk about it. Yeah. And you wrote the book. You know what that means. Mm-hmm. What happens? It lives inside her. She's a sad person, and she's such a good person.
Yeah.
She's very kind. She's a great nurse. Her colleagues love her. I mean, and I know because I worked in the same hospital, but she has that look of sadness all the time. Mm-hmm. And when she talks about her mom, she's afraid. She goes, I'm afraid I can't stop crying. Well, why? Because all that sadness has been welled up for so long that, of course, it seems like a floodgate. So we do it little by little. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's very important in terms of these hurts that are unresolved is sadness is not depression. Elvin Semmerat, a loved Boston psychoanalyst, used to say that sadness is the vitamin of growth. Why? Because it slows us down to really look at what's hurting us and address it. When we run away from it, what do? Then we have that tension inside us. We're anxious, we're uncomfortable. And then we have to turn to drugs or sex or something to quiet us down, or pills at night.
Beautifully explained and I think rendered. I think our listeners and viewers will be able to relate to a lot of what you just said there. So that was the R in reggae, which is resolve your past hurts. We've been talking a good bit about the E, which is expand your empathic range. Do you want to say anything more about that, or you want me to keep going?
Well, just the phrase that's so important with expanding your empathic range is slow down. If you speed up, you produce those stress chemicals, you can't see clearly. If you slow down, I always tell people when when people go through a divorce, they've got their first date, and they're longing to connect to someone, slow down, okay? Because just because he has blue eyes, he's 6'3" and he's tall, doesn't mean he's a great person. He could be a serial murderer. So let's slow down.
Oh my goodness.
Try not to idealize and just enjoy yourself, okay?
Beautiful. Okay, so the first G is for finding something to be grateful for every day. Yes, amen. I talk a lot about that in my talks and my books as well.
Yes, and we know that people who participate in grateful journals write down every morning 5 things they're grateful for. At the end of the night, 5 or 10 things they're grateful for. They do better. Why? Because we often ignore it. We don't even realize that the restaurant we just ate at, that the food was so wonderful. Did you thank the waiter? Did you see the manager and thank him? Did you tell her that she was so kind when you asked for a different drink and she went and got it, and her mood seemed so pleasant? Do we even notice the people around us because we're so consumed with our own ego needs? I'm hungry. Okay. It doesn't mean you can't be kind.
Right. Oh, so true. And that brings us to the second G, which is certainly beautifully situated and related. Second G is learn the true meaning of being gracious.
That is so important, because I think even as we age, it's so important to be, the Buddhists have a phrase, loving kindness, and they say it always begins with us, loving kindness to yourself. And that's where grace is. And even some people, as they age, they don't look as well, or they're even near death. They die with grace. The Buddhists talk about when you die in grace, you come back in grace. I don't know whether we come back or not, but I think it's a kinder, easier death of leaving this earth. But just having grace in life, being appreciative, they go together.
So beautiful. Completely agree with that, of course, as we both have rendered this from our own hearts. Next is A, for appreciate what you have, not what you want.
Americans are obsessed with what we want. And when we're unhappy, we don't often realize that we think the next rabbit we catch is going to solve it. The sports car, the bigger house, the prettier woman, because you're married to somebody who's 60, so you have an affair with somebody who's 30, and that's going to make you happy. Everything is external, not realizing it's an internal job.
Yeah. It
starts inside. If you keep reaching outside, you can't solve an internal problem with an external solution. You just can't. But many people think they can. This is why we're so driven.
Yeah.
I have patients from other countries who come here. They always wanted to come to America because they thought this is the place where you can make a great living. But they can't believe how unhappy we are.
Right.
They say it over and over again. I just can't believe how unhappy people are here. Yeah. And how upset they
go
are.
Back home, yeah.
Mad at the cab driver and mad at yeah. And you go to another country and people say, "Oh, they're so relaxed." There's a story in the book, Henry, one of the first stories, and he owns 7 companies, very wealthy, hard-driven person. Okay, he went to Italy with his new wife. Okay, and he came back, and people in the relationship group said, "So how was Italy?" "I can't believe it." "What can't you believe?" "Do you know how much better their economy could be if they didn't take 2 hours off at lunch? I mean, this is ridiculous." And one of the women said, "Tom, I want to ask you a question. Did they seem happy?" "Yeah, they're happy, but they're really happy, but they could be making a lot more money." Okay, so you know why he's not happy.
Back on the wanting more, but not appreciating what you have. So, okay. So the last letter is E, which is regulate your emotions in a balanced way.
We can either be too hot or too cold, right? The healthiest person has emotions that fit with the situation. We cry at a funeral. We have joy and laughter at a party, but we don't go up and down and up and down. We are balanced in terms of what the situation calls for. Some people, because they haven't developed their emotional life, they're like one-trick ponies. They're like, the person who always cries no matter where they are. And then there's the person who's angry and telling jokes even if they're at a funeral. Mm-hmm. They're in the back room telling jokes because that's all they do. They don't know how to shift to what the situation calls for. And that's what balanced emotions are.
Beautifully explained, of course. All right, our last break here. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We went on the air with Dr. Arthur Ciaramicoli, who is a licensed clinical psychologist whose new book, The Power of Soulful Healing, Turning Wounds into Wisdom, and he's got another one coming out, Echoes of the Heart, Unlearning Negative Conditioning. They've recently come out. He's also got other ones planned as well. The man continues to write because he's so passionate about what he does. We've been talking a bit about our model of how you can start to develop more soulfulness in your own life. After the break, we're going to talk about a couple things immediately. One is learning to unlearn what is no longer serving you, and then also giving you some signs that you're not quite awake yet for this process. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. As you know by now, this program is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you along your journey to realize more of your potential. If you want to learn more about how we can work together and learn about the Gusto Now Academy for leaders and individuals on various journeys alike, make your way to gusto-now.com and then navigate to the training tab and you can find the Academy. We'd love to have you join us. Check it out. If you are just coming in now, my guest is Dr. Arthur Ciaramicoli. He's a licensed clinical psychologist, has many books out, and has spent his life dedicated to really helping people learn, grow, and become more of who they really can grow into. So this last bit here, I want to situate a few things for our listeners and viewers, and I continue to be amazed, Arthur, in my own conversations with people. When I tell them the importance of learning to unlearn things, they're very confused by that because they often think that it's about accumulating knowledge and they don't understand how important it is to unlearn the things that are no longer serving us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is a confusing term for a lot of people because as you said, they usually think about learning more and more, but unlearning is so important because what we're talking about is unlearning the false perceptions of yourself. I was told when I was a senior in high school that I wasn't college material, okay? And I believed it. Mm-hmm. I believed it because I didn't know any educated people. I came from a blue-collar town, and my guidance counselor said, he gave me brochures for the Army, the Navy, the Marines, and so forth, and said, pick one and come back tomorrow and we'll talk about it. My point is, it wasn't true. And how do we find out what the truth is? The only way we can find out what the truth is from other people who we trust and know will tell us the truth. You know the old saying, a good friend tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
Yes. And, the other thing that I'll add to this, every single one of us, of course, have been given a perspective or told something in our life. And of course, that was from the other person's perhaps well-intentioned perspective, sometimes not. But also we picked up things, we gleaned an idea about how we thought the world worked, and we embraced it because it helped us to survive. And that is where I see in my practice a lot of people needing to let go of those things that they learned early at age 3, 4, 5 that really worked well back then, but boy, don't work at all now.
Mm-hmm. And that's such an important point, Alise, because if you grow up in an environment where one of your parents is alcoholic and violent, you don't assert yourself. That's foolish, because if you assert yourself, you're going to get hit. Or if you assert yourself, you're going to get abandoned. So you learn that style, but the problem is then you generalize to the population. Everybody's like my alcoholic, violent dad, so I can't assert myself in life. So you become a woman who's passive and never asserts in the face of men, and then gets abused or taken advantage of by certain males who would do that. So you have to unlearn that, which is very hard, because when we grow up, our little family seems like a world. It's the whole world. So everybody is like the people in our family. No, that's not true. And we can know that from the neck up, but to know it emotionally in our hearts takes time and work, and hearing from other people what their perspectives are that we trust.
Such a beautiful journey to be on. And at this juncture, I think it makes a lot of sense, as I think the people that are still listening to this podcast as of now are probably starting to think, I really would like some of this. I want more of this. I want to be on this soulful learning journey. I want to heal through a more of a soulful way. So what I want to do next is I want to situate a few things that might indicate that maybe you're leaning into this whole process. And you have an opportunity to further awaken, to be able to really step into this space of owning your soulfulness and really nurturing it. So if just a few things that we talk about in the book that might indicate that you're not quite awake yet, but you're maybe reaching. And the first thing that I always like to talk about is just having a general lack of curiosity, not really being interested in people of other faiths, learning like we were talking about before, believing that you have all the answers. It's this or it's that. There's that black and white thinking that might be an indication that there's a real opening for you to really start to step into the space more deeply with us. Another one is, of course, just a constant distraction, constantly feeling like you need to have something going. The TV's on, your cell phone's playing something, or just things are going on around you that might indicate that you have such a need for this ongoing stimulation that you haven't yet made a space for this inquiry of being soulful and meditative. We've been talking about gratitude, a lack of gratitude, not being able to see what really is great and good in your life already. And the last one I'll mention for now is just an emotional numbness, not even recognizing maybe that when there is an opportunity to be joyful and it flies by you, or when somebody shares that they've lost someone really important and you can't really feel or get present to what that must be like for them. That's an emotional numbness that might tell you that there's some real opportunity for you to start to step into this space with us and cultivate this opportunity for spiritual and soulful healing and connection. Anything you want to add to that, Arthur? There's much that we covered in the book, but those are just a few to get them thinking about it.
Well, I think the emotional numbness is very important, Alise, because again, I don't think people often realize why. Like, for instance, someone says, well, I can't go to my friend's mother's funeral because I just too uncomfortable, and I don't feel a lot inside, and I'd probably be embarrassed. Well, why are you numb in that situation? Because something behind you has happened that you haven't dealt with, your own losses. When we have to confront the loss of another person, we confront all our losses. And a lot of times people can't move into that space because they have never resolved what's behind them. When you have resolved what's behind you, you're the first one there. Not because you love being there. I mean, a funeral isn't a happy time, but you're there because you love the person that is hurting. And you know what it's like, and you know how to deal with it because you've dealt with it. When you've never dealt with it, you want to run away from loss. I mean, why at funerals do people drink so much? I have a friend who lost his father not long ago, does not drink, doesn't drink alcohol, doesn't do any drugs. At the funeral, at the memorial service, he had a glass of wine in one hand and a beer in the other. And as we were talking, he was doing this. I don't even think he knew what he was doing. Because he's a good person, but a kind of stoic person who didn't shed a tear at his father's funeral, even though I knew they were close, but he was cut off from it. So there he is with the booze, trying to do something that's going to make him feel okay. Of course, it doesn't work.
And that's how it's everywhere, right? It's everywhere around us, which is, of course, one of the many reasons you and I just felt so compelled to write this book. We're coming close to the end of our time, but there's just a couple more things I would love for us to talk about if we can. There's so much more we could talk about in this book. But I would love for you to tell the story of Gina. And it's really in the chapter on the loneliness of an unhealed heart and hurt. Can you share a bit about that story? It's so achingly beautiful.
Yeah, Gina is an Italian-American patient who came to me. She was referred to me by a friend of mine who's a cardiologist, and she looks very much like Valerie Bertinelli. I mean, they would look like twins if you ever remember her in the movies and on TV.
I do.
5'4", dark hair, beautiful dark round eyes, but she grew up in a family where there was a fair amount of abuse and criticism of her as a female, and particularly about her weight. Older brothers criticized her for her weight, and she was called chubby, and went into adolescence, not very popular. Went on to college and met a man who was not very kind to her, but because he liked her, she liked him. That was the deal. And she married, he had affairs, she eventually divorced. She went to see a clinical psychologist who I do not respect, and I knew was fairly arrogant, did some testing, psychological testing, and gave her the report, and in the report, he labeled her pathetic. And then she came to me, and we started seeing each other individually. She started to trust me more, and then I added her to one of my relationship groups where she blossomed. Why did she blossom? Because she started to see who she really is. She came in early to the first group. She started talking to some of the other people. She's very affable and warm, and she at times would mention these self-criticisms, and people would smile like, where are you coming from? And then we would explore where they are coming from, the things she heard as a child, and then she was in the unlearning process. Yep. The unlearning process of this is not true, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. Then as she started to lose weight naturally, because one of the women is a nurse practitioner who specializes in weight in the group, and she gave her some advice here and there, and talked about her workout. She started to walk. She started to go to a gym. She started to feel better about herself from the inside out, not from the outside in. She had drank some to cope. She stopped the alcohol, and then she met someone, and eventually her life becomes much different because she unlearned the inaccurate story that she came into her adult world with. And she did it with the help of friends, reasonable, empathic people who would tell her the truth, not just to make her feel good, but to tell her the truth that you're wrong, saying you're not intelligent, you're not pretty, you're too short, you're too everything. One of the fellows said to her he said, you're too negative everything. So there's nothing good about you, right? And she laughed. And because she started to trust these people, especially the men, she could take in feedback from them and believe it. And that's what it takes. You learn inaccurate things about yourself from people who don't perceive accurately, and then you have to unlearn them from people who do perceive accurately. A lot of people don't have this opportunity. So they go through their whole life thinking they're not college material, and I'd be working in a factory. You never change the story.
Oh, Arthur, there's so many beautiful things that I feel like we've gotten to be able to surface for our listeners and viewers. And of course, now we're out of time, but we also talk about how to be able to cultivate soulful families, soulful relationships, as well as at work, in the workplace. And so there's much here that you can learn in this book. And we invite you to come along the journey with us. Arthur, thanks for coming back on Working the Purpose a fifth time. I am grateful and honored to call you my friend and my co-author.
And, you know, I feel exactly the same, mutual empathy.
Listeners and viewers, you are going to want to learn more about my beautiful and cherished friend, Dr. Arthur Ciaramicoli, the work that he does as a clinical psychologist, and his numerous books. So I want you to go and visit his site. One of his sites is booksbydrciaramicoli.com. Let me spell that for you. So books by doctor, so DR, and then Ciaramicoli is spelled Ciaramicoli, Dr. Ciaramicoli. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. See you there for another nourishing and inspiring conversation featuring yet another thought leader that will help us elevate our lives, our thinking, our connections. And remember that work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave in any capacity we want to experience it. And it can give us the chance to do business in a way that betters the world. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.